Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rinnie. And today we're getting mindful about men's mental health, so one of my absolute passion pieces to talk about, and actually the power of running to heal. And joining me for today's discussion, I've got Lachy Cameron from New South Wales. How you going, Lachy?
Good, mate. Thanks so much for having me on.
Looking forward to having you on, and thanks for coming on. It is a Sunday morning, so thanks for taking time out of your weekend to have a chat with me about men's mental health. To introduce you to the Mindful Men community, you're doing something pretty spectacular in May this year, and my editor, Sam, loves a good timestamp. So in May 2024, you are going to run from Brisbane to Sydney with the aim of being not only the fastest time, but also raising awareness for health and well-being, and particularly mental health. And for anyone who's not sure how far it is between Brisbane and Sydney, it's roughly around 1,000 kilometres, and it's about a 10-hour drive, and you're actually going to do it by pounding the pavement. So, Lachy, that is amazing. First, before we get into your story and the run itself, why did you pick a run to advocate and talk about or get people inspired about mental health?
I think for me, it's just what running has been able to do for my mental health. Obviously, running's different for everyone and doesn't work for everyone. But for me, what it's been able to do in completely reinventing and rebuilding my confidence, it's the perfect way I can think to do it. And, running for me is obviously there's a physical element to it. And for me, a lot of the times a shorter run feels a lot harder than a longer run, which is funny. But for me, running will always just be so much more than the simple art of putting one foot in front of the other. What it's taught me is it's just a way to live my life. And previously, if there was hard things, I would just run around it. I'd never try and go through it. I wouldn't face it. Whereas it's taught me in life, there's a lot of similarities between ultra running and life, in that there's going to be good times, which you're right in the highs of, but there's going to be a lot of bad times. And what are you going to do? You're going to run from those things. But now I know I'll never run from those things. I'm going to face it head on. And, I can't think of a better way to really show people what you can possibly do than, just by and large, a pretty normal guy. If you go back to a few years ago, it wasn't anything special, and wants to go out there and make change in the world in his outlet for doing that.
Why did you pick 1,000 kilometres to do this for? That's a long way. And I even put it in Google Maps, and it didn't even give you a prompt to walk it. It's
Google, you would just take the car. Yeah, it's easy. Why'd you do that?
Why 1,000 kilometres? Have you done this kind of distance before?
I've done a few 100-kilometre ultras, but no, nothing to that extent. My running journey has been it's been a very rapid rise. If you go back to the last 3 months of 2021, that's when I started running. And I was never a runner. I never did athletics. A lot of people who sort of take it up again later in life, they have sort of a background in athletics and maybe they've let it slip, but I never had any of that. I played rugby as a kid, but wasn't overly built to be a long distance runner. And I really didn't like it, to be honest, because I wasn't mentally equipped for it. Long distance running is all you had. Your body and your legs are the vessel for movement, but your brain decides, oh no, I'm done here. I'm going to stop. And that's where I was very weak mentally. But so it's been a bit of a, for me, I didn't think it was such a rapid progression, when I got into it, but talking to my physios and things like that, to go from, never running to in 3 years, you're doing 100K ultras, it's pretty rapid. But yeah, once I was sort of able to do those things, that's when I realized, I have some kind of innate ability for this. And then I was lucky that I met Ned Brockman pretty early on in my journey. And I met him before he actually had done his massive run. I was seeing a girl, and she's like, oh, you're into running. You want to meet a friend of mine? He does a bit of running. And it's funny, you don't know when you're sitting across from greatness, because he obviously hadn't done his run yet. So I was just sitting in his house, and there's this 23-year-old kid going, oh, yeah, I'm going to go run 4,000 Ks. And I think I was eating a chicken schnitzel sandwich. I was like, oh, yeah, mate, sure you are. Yeah, no worries. But then he just goes and does it, right? And it was after that, I had these ideas of wanting to keep going further and further, but when someone goes up, I mean, any physio will tell you, like, there's no reason he should have been able to do that. Like most people who do these long distance things, they've been running for 10, 15 years and they've built up the ability for their body to withstand that. And everyone would have told him you can't do it. Everyone except for him, you know? And I just believe after seeing something like that, no one can tell you can't do something. If you're willing to really, if it means enough to you and you're willing to put in the work, no one can tell you what you can and can't do. And it was after seeing something like that, I was like, oh, you know, he saw an issue in the community, like homelessness coming in from the country. And, you know, a lot of people would see an issue and maybe they give $10 to someone on the street every day. And yeah, that's still massive. That's still making change in someone's life. But he actually went out and he raised millions of dollars and he would have changed so many people's lives. And seeing someone do that, and it's very hard to really make a change these days in the world, but he did. And knowing I have an ability to do, like to obviously endure, and having something like which is so dear to my heart and mental health, it was very, very quick for me to want to put those things together. And then I was just thinking about it and I was like, oh God, Perth to Sydney seems pretty far. So where else could I go? So then I just sort of landed on Brisbane. It wasn't really, there's nothing special behind it, but I thought, 1,000 Ks, that sounds just about hard
enough. Is there a time limit? Like you're trying to do it in the fastest time possible, but like what is the fastest time? Are you aiming for something like, is this a 1 day, 2 day, 5 day type thing? Talk us through the time frame that you'll be running.
Yeah, so the fastest known time is currently with Joe Ward, which is 11 days, 7 hours, and he's a very, very accomplished runner with a list of accomplishments longer than my arm. And you know, it's crazy to even thought like to be spoken in the same vein as him. And he's just so willing. Like I spoke to him and he sent me all these Strava files and he's just so willing to share, which I think running is a very different sport in that I don't know many other things where if you're trying to take a record from someone apart from telling you to get stuff, they'd even speak a word to you. But he was so willing. And I think because he knows that obviously there's the record element behind it, but there's the personal growth and the external growth you can give to people as well. And he also did his run for mental health. So he's been a massive help, and I can't thank him enough just for talking to me about it. But yeah, so 11 days, 7 hours is the current record, and I'm trying to do it in 10, which would work out to be about 100 Ks a day. And you know, for me, it would mean enough just to do it, but I really want to try and go for it just to show people what you really can do. You know, we all have this massive untapped reservoir of potential, and you've just got to want to put in the work to find out what it is. You know, like I went through my life and I always believed I was destined for greatness, and I think I lent on that to assume something was just going to happen in my life. Like it's hard to put it down to people. I just believed something was going to happen, whether it's politics or whether it's just something in life. But then I never did anything to back that up. And then I was just like, oh, when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen? And that's bullshit. You may have destiny. That's fine. You may believe that, but you've got to earn that. You've got to work and work and work for that. And then you will find out what your destiny is. And I just never did. But, you know, putting in all this work, I'm now able to see that I was right from the start. And I am destined to do this. And, you know, it's not from going out and breaking records. It's not owning the accomplishment. It's helping people. That's what I found like in this journey, and like how much it means to me just to help one of my friends or help someone I don't know, like getting a message from someone saying that my journey has helped them. It brings me to tears because it's just like, I know what it feels like to be in that place, and to know I'm helping people really means the world to me.
Let's unpack that helping people part, because the reason I started this podcast was to share stories about overcoming some sort of adversity, whether it's mental health or physical health, disability, parenting, careers, whatever that adversity is. I'd love to hear your story about, you know, what you've gone through over the years to, I guess, lead towards where you are at today. So, yeah, if you're open to it, start where it starts. So, is it childhood? Is it teens? Where does your story start?
I think for me, like a lot of people who have never met me before would see who I am today, and I'm super proud of that person, but they have no idea the evolution and the work that's put in. Like I haven't just been like this my whole life, and it's not that I've been a bad person, but you know, I had a very normal childhood and I had two loving parents. But I think like a lot of us, my parents ended up splitting up, and you know, I was very fortunate in that I had my stepdad come in at a very young age, and he to me was just, he really personifies what a good man should be. You know, he probably could be a little bit better at opening up and sharing his emotions, but he's just a good, honest man, and he's taught me good values, and I can't thank him enough for being that person. But you know, as a little kid, you're always going to have some attachment to your biological parents, and I had attachment to my biological dad, and we still had a relationship, but it was very one-sided. And you know, for him, I guess I just wasn't high priority. And, you know, as a little kid, you're not thinking logically, you know, and then the parent stops turning up for you. It must be something you've done, or it must be your fault. And, you remember the good moments in life. You remember going to the shows, going to the Easter show, going to these different things. But one thing that will burn into your brain is when the parents aren't there for you. And, I remember going to things and him saying he's going to turn up, and I would sit in the gutter waiting for him, and him not turning up, and things like that. They sort of etch into your brain. And what they start doing is they chip away at you and they erode at you, and you just believe that it's something that you're doing or it's something that you don't have to give. And once you start that belief, it's very easy for that just to really work its way through you, and it's very hard to eradicate that. And then I guess for me, I just had this belief that I wasn't good enough or something was wrong with me, and how I was able to cope with that as a child was masking. So what I would do is I'd go in a room and every single person would get a slightly different version of me, just tailored to what they needed. And, it's fine because everyone's laughing and, you're giving people what they want, but you're not doing it for yourself. You're not being true to who you are. And the problem with that ideology is that you just constantly, just little by little, chipping away at yourself in that you and yourself are good enough. And when you do that for so long as a kid, you then created a lot of holes, which you need to patch up with something. And then I think, unfortunately, this culture, like in Australia, we have a pretty heavy drinking culture. And, as a young adolescent, like probably 16 or so, I found drugs and alcohol, and they're really good at help you patch up those holes for the night or whenever it was. But they then make it a lot worse. But if you just never stop, which I never did, you never really notice it until everything comes to a crescendo. But yeah, that was sort of how I got through younger years. And then, like I said, as a teen, sort of finding drugs and alcohol, that also helped me find an identity as well, because it's very personified to be the guy who's, oh, look, he's always off his head, but everyone's laughing, and it seems fine because, like I said, you've got an identity finally. That's who I am, and that's fine, and I make people laugh, and it's all good. But all you've just done your whole life is just completely erode the fact that you and whatever you truly are as a person is good enough. And once you've done that for so long, you just have nothing left. Once you remove the drugs and alcohol, and you're trying to sit there on your own, you're just like, oh God, I have nothing. I have no personality. I have no anything on my own. I can't stand on my own 2 feet. And it's through things like that things can get really, really difficult.
You touched on so many things. In fact, I was just on a podcast just before we dialed in where I was a guest talking about my alcohol story. And I remember 15 or so, I found alcohol through my footy club as well. So I grew up playing Aussie rules footy, and it was the end of season trip. I had my first beer, which was one of the most revolting beers in the world.
What beer was it? Do you remember?
VB.
Oh, a can? A can or?
No, it was in a stubby. It was just disgusting. Sorry for anyone who likes VB out there, but it isn't great. But
it's not the very best though, yeah?
No. But I remember it just obliterated any sense of anxiety or stress that I had in the world. And what I have come to realize is that was undiagnosed mental health conditions. So I had OCD, depression, anxiety, but as you said, it filled a hole for me, and it kept filling holes for me for 25 years until I finally said, you know what, I've got to start patching these holes up for myself with healthy alternatives. What was the influences around you? And you mentioned you get obliterated and drunk and everyone would be cheering you on, which it reminds me of all the house parties that I went to. We would write ourselves off, and it would be those people who writ themselves off who would be cheered on at school, say, the next week. Oh, you were so funny. You were so cool. You did this. You did that. What was that like for you? Who were the influences around you? Was it friends? Was it media? What kept you doing that week in, week out?
I guess it would be quote unquote friends, the people you call friends back then. But, a lot of it, I don't, I put things on people my whole life and I never was honest with myself. But look, in reflection, I can look back and say, all those things I did on my own volition. You know what I mean? Yeah, people might rub on you. But the second you want to try and tell me that anyone made you do those things, I just can't cop it. Because I know I did those all myself. And it's once you can admit that to yourself that you can start growing. If you sit there and have all these problems that went on in your life, but you can sit and make excuses for yourself, you're never going to grow. And I never did. And yeah, that was just me. It's what I needed to do for people to like me and to think that I was interesting and think I was cool. And that's what I really wanted. I wanted to be cool and I wanted to be liked. But working through that now, I don't need to be anything more than myself with everyone else. And we all need to know that, we're all good enough, and you don't need to be that person that has to go and do these crazy outlandish things to impress people. You just need to do things for yourself. And I'm just glad I'm able to find that at still a young age. I'm glad I didn't blink, and I'm 40 and I'm still that guy at the pub just writing himself off. I feel very grateful, and I feel like I've got a second chance at life.
You said something really powerful there, is that we often deflect outwards. We think it's everybody else that are telling us to do this or influencing us. And to some degree, there's a bit of influence, but a lot of it's us and our own responses to what's going on internally. That often, as a young guy, we don't know what's going on inside because maybe we haven't been in circles where we've talked about mental health or things like that. Was that the experience you had, like your social circles, your school circles, or your family circles? Did they ever talk about mental health and struggle, or was it something that was kept hush-hush? Because for me, it was very hush-hush and we didn't talk about it. So I'd love to hear your experience of that too.
Definitely. And I think for so long, vulnerability has been disguised as weakness when it's really strength. Being able to sit there and be honest about how you're feeling and who you are, like that's pure strength. But if, back even when I was a kid, it's not that long ago, if you try to tell people how you're feeling mentally, that's what's wrong with you. Like you just would be weak. That's all you would be told to be. And no, it wasn't. We definitely never spoke about it. And mental health, there's been a massive rise in like the last 10 years, which is amazing. But yeah, it wasn't until, I got into like my 20s, like sort of early 20s, that when I just done a complete number on myself, that's when I started taking a note of mental health, because I just realized how I was feeling isn't right. Like I remember having conversations with friends of mine and just asking them things like, oh, do you ever think like this? Or do you ever have these? And like, no. And I was like, oh, like, what do you mean? Like, I feel like this every single day. And I just thought it was normal. And I was just so used to having to patch these things up. I thought everyone felt like that. And it wasn't until having those conversations with people that they felt so differently that I realized that something's going on that I need to try and look at or address. But not that I addressed it healthily, but yeah, just that something was going on.
And how bad did things get for you? Like how bad did the drinking, the drugs get? How bad did your mental health get?
It's funny, like you never, only in reflection, I never realized that the drinking and the drugs was bad, ever. I just thought it was fine. And I think for me, it was because I didn't have anything in my world that I felt like I was good at. And I feel like a lot of us, especially Australia, it's personified to like drinking culture, but also work culture. And for me, I didn't have anything, but when I went to work, I've always been good at what I do. And I've never understood, like I worked 6 days a week for like 8 years. And my ex-partner would always say, oh, please, you should not work on Saturday. I was like, no, we have to. I've got to work. And I've never understood at the time why. I just had to do it. And looking back at reflection, I know it's because it gave me a sense of identity. I could go to work and I was good at it. And that's all I would talk about if I wasn't drinking or on drugs. And look at all this work I could do, because it gave me a reason. It gave me a sense of, identity. But I was just living this toxic life of you'd go out and I would drink every single day because I was in so much pain. And then you'd do drugs once or twice a week. You work 6 days a week. On Sunday, you'd be hungover and you'd do it all over again for 7 or 8 years, And then it's a wonder why your mental health's in shatters. I can't put that together. But yeah, it got really bad. But it's funny how like it depends on how much pain you're willing to go through and still not change from it. Like there was a night where like I'd been very close to taking my own life a few times, and I know that mindset, but I'd always been in a decent headspace enough not to go that next step. But there was a night where I was out and I was drinking very heavily and I was on drugs, and I snapped, and I knew I was going to do it. And I was fortunate enough that I was with some people, and I got a very close friend of mine. She ended up taking me to hospital, and I sat in there for 12 hours in this white room. They take everything off you, and yeah, it's very sobering. And I think about it from time to time, like. And then my parents came in, I think it was like 2:00 in the morning, and, mum and dad I told them some of the things that were going on, but to see that for them would have been just a very rude awakening, and, this massive thing. And even from that though, I didn't change, right? Because I had these things that I could lean on, and I could have these things I could find people to say, oh, poor me. And I never changed from that, something like that, which most people, that's rock bottom. But for me, it wasn't. And I just went back to what I was doing. And I think that was maybe when I was 23, 22. And then it wasn't until I was 25 or so, like I was with a girl for nearly 8 years, and we were just about to buy a house and get engaged, and she dumped me. She couldn't handle sort of our relationship anymore. And that's for me what it was. Like she left, and, when you have, like, my life was there, it was etched in front of me, and I could see the path. And, I've got the white picket fence, I've got a couple of kids, I've got probably a couple of dogs, and, everything's fine. I'm going to keep going to work 6 days a week. All that was there. And it wasn't until that was taken away. And for me, I needed to be left sitting there on my own, and I needed to have this house of cards falling down around me. And it definitely still could have gone either way. I could have just stayed left and what I was doing, or I think I was just fortunate in that, like I said, because I've always believed I was going to do something, that in that moment, I was like, look, man, it can go either way. It's up to you. You can keep doing what you're doing and you know where X, Y, and Z is going to go because you've done it forever. Or this moment now is when you have to change. This moment now is when you have to not go and run 1,000 kilometers because that was not even in the frame. But this is where you just need to try and be a little bit better. And for me, that's the one massive thing I tell people. Like when you leave such a negative like lifestyle, people go, oh, well, I need to change. And then they just dump all these things in their life. And then they wonder why they can't hold out for it for more than a month. But it's because we live in a world where food and water can get delivered to our doors. So we don't need to do anything. Like our willpower is so low. And then you're trying to change yourself so massively, you're never going to stick to it. I made a decision that I just needed to be a little bit better every day. And I just started incrementally trying to make sure I didn't drink as much alcohol, try to cut back on doing drugs, try to get a little bit more sleep, like things like that. And then running came into my life as well. Like it wasn't trying to be, okay, I'm going to go run an ultra marathon. That'll fix me. That'll make me better. No, it wasn't that at all. It was just a conscious decision that I needed to be a little bit better. And then once you make that pact and you hold yourself to that pact, it's really powerful and you can really grow from it.
You mentioned working 6 days a week. What was the career that you were in?
Still in it now. It's in construction, which I think is part of it as well. Like I love construction. I'm still a kid at heart that loves building things, but I think there's a really, really negative society within construction. And I think that, it's personified for us all to go to the pub and write ourselves off. And then we all come in and work massive hours and work 6 days a week. And it's definitely getting better. And especially as well, like people in construction talking about mental health. Like there's way too many people that we lose just in general, but also in the construction field to mental health issues. But I think a lot of work still needs to be done in just knowing that there is so much life to be given outside of work, and that can't be your sole purpose in life. And there's so many beautiful things outside of there, and work is always going to be a massive part of us. We spend so much time there each week, but there's so much more living rather than the existing we do, which is just going to work every day.
I'm glad you brought up the construction industry, because when we think about the statistics on men's mental health, and particularly suicide, construction industry and trades are overrepresented in that. They're actually, their numbers are higher than the general population as well. So it is such I think, an issue in the construction industry. And we're starting to see organisations like Mates for Construction and stuff like that coming in, talking about men's mental health or mental health in general. Around the yard or around the building side or whatever, like how have you seen mental health discussions play out? Have they been largely ignored, or are you starting to see a shift in that space as well?
Yes and no. Like you're starting to see a shift in the space in that, like Mates in Construction, and you get more events being put on and in the workplace. But in terms of the bloke to bloke, there still needs so much work to be done. You know what I mean? Like, not to say that the big companies are just ticking the boxes, but they are doing the right things, getting these things in. But in terms of the guys you really meet on site, like, I don't feel a lot has changed even in the last 10 years. I feel like a lot of people are still the same. And if you were really honest to a lot of people about how you felt, you'd probably still get called weak. And I just think that's how, when you put so many of those guys together, like I just think you're afraid to be true to who you are. Like I went to an all boys school, and I think it was very similar in that sort of instance, in that, you're never going to be that open, emotional guy around each other. And I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and just being okay to who we are around other blokes.
And I guess you providing this voice can be an inspiration for other tradies and construction workers out there to go, you know what, if Lachy's talking about this, maybe I can talk about this too. And that's what I love about podcasting and social media, is that we can start advocating for men's mental health and engaging with it to normalise it in the same way we do our physical health. And so I'm interested, like you said you went to the hospital and you had that night in hospital. You didn't really change, but you'd spoken to your mum and dad a few times. You'd obviously spoken to a few friends as well. What else did you do in terms of healing or moving that from that, what you were doing, to what you wanted to do in your life? I mean, you said you started running. Did you do therapy? Did you speak to a GP or a therapist? What else was around you that started pushing you in this right direction?
Yeah, I went to a GP. Like my stepdad, Mick, he took me to there, and I filled out the Kessler form, and he's definitely like helped kickstart my journey with that. And I went to therapy for a long time, but I still feel like for me, I was ticking boxes. I was doing those things because I was supposed to, but in terms of really trying to make positive change in my life, it wasn't until that moment where everything left. And I think that's just what I needed. If I had one crutch, one person to lean on it and for me to feel sorry for, then I just never would have changed. And everyone's different. Some people need more help than others. Some people really need people to pull them out. But I just think I needed to do it on my own. And for me to realize that what I'm actually capable of doing, and not sitting there feeling sorry for myself and not getting people to help me, and what I was able to do. And, yeah, it was just that moment where, no one was there. You know what I mean? And like, so I could have just kept going on. And I wasn't the worst person in the world. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not trying to say I was this terrible guy, but the man I am now, it's chalk and cheese for that guy, right? But it's still the same person. Go back a few years ago, and it's just from this positive change that I wanted to create and just simply wanting to be a little bit better. That's just such a powerful thing, which I try and tell people, that we all have this untapped reservoir of potential, but it just all comes from this desire and want just to be a little bit better than yourself, and not comparing. Like, comparison's the thief of joy. All I ever wanted to be was someone else. I'd never wanted to be myself because I didn't think I was good enough, but we're all good enough. But the power of wanting to be better than yourself, for me, is this massive driving factor. And I just know I'm always going to try and be better because of it.
So your partner's left and you've come to this realization that you need to do the work on you. Talk us through that first run, for example. Like, it was around the block. Did you go for a 5-hour just jog? Like, where did this energy come from to just start running and start healing through running?
It came for physical fitness. Like, I've always been a skinny-ish guy, but I was just in terrible shape, man. Like, I was just white, pasty. I had a bit of a gut, and like just in like my lungs just couldn't handle anything. And I just thought, look, I need to do something. But it was sort of during COVID, so I obviously couldn't go to the gym. So I'm like, okay, I'll just go try and do something, whatever it is. And I was trying to run 5K, and a lot of the times it was a lot less, and a lot of times I was throwing up, a lot of walking, and it was honestly torture. Like, people wouldn't believe it now, but it was brutal. But I just stuck to it, and I think it's because, I knew that I had this belief that I was going to do something great in the world, and this was just me just trying to prove myself right. And I think for too long I was trying to prove everyone else right, or prove them wrong, or do something because of what they thought. And whenever I went out, and because I also deleted social media, which I think was massive for me, and I didn't need validation for it. All these runs I did, no one posted it. Like, no one knew about it, but I knew. And I was like, when you have no self-confidence and you never do anything right for yourself, like, you constantly just let yourself down. And the next thing you know, you're going out and you're running twice a week. You just start from zero, but it's like your cells regenerate every 7 years. Like, I was regenerating myself, and I was regenerating this confidence, like, fuck, look what I can actually do just for me. I'm not doing this for anyone. So no one cares. Like, I'm not breaking any land speed records doing these 5Ks, but I'm rebuilding the fact that I'm good enough, and I'm proving that to myself. And it was just addictive, and then as my capabilities, like, as I stuck to it, my capabilities got more and more, and I was able to get a little bit faster, which was fun. But I don't really think I'm built for speed. I think I'm built for the long haul. And I still remember the first time I ran 10 kilometers. I was just like, whoa, like, I couldn't believe it, because it was just so much. It's double what I'd ever done. It was crazy. But then growth isn't linear, change isn't linear. And, I went back the next time, and then bang, I couldn't really run 5K again. Like, oh God. But it was that little moment where I did that 10K where I was just fascinated with the idea of sort of just pushing my envelope of how far I can actually go. Because for me, it was this ideology that I'm not going to quit on myself. And yeah, it's not going to be pretty, but I'm doing this for me, and I'm just not quitting on myself ever again, because that's what I'd done for my life, really. I'd quit on myself when I hadn't done anything for myself, and I'd stopped believing in myself.
Like, for so many guys, it's take up running. We start, and then we might hit that 5K, we might do that 10K, and then that's it. But we don't change anything else about our lives. We might still drink, we might still take drugs, we still eat shit.
Yeah.
Did you change everything holistically, or was it just purely the running that you focused on, and all the other things maybe fell into place over time?
I tried to just cut back the drinking a little bit and doing drugs as much, and trying to get a bit more sleep. And then that obviously helped my running. And then, I feel commitment is something we tie to relationships, which makes a lot of sense. But to me, commitment is the 24 hours we get in each day, and whatever you want to prioritize your time to, that's what you're committed to. That's what means a lot to you. And the more and more I got into running, the more and more you naturally have to change and have to cut things out of your life. And, that's what helped me to do it. But I'm just glad, like, as I said, I did it just incrementally. Like, running stayed, running never left, but I would still drink and I'd still do drugs occasionally. Like, the first time I ever run a marathon, I was horrendously hungover, like really, really badly. And I think I woke up at like 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock. And I was like, well, you need to go repent for your sins. And I went out just to run a marathon, like hungover as. And it was just like, okay, like, I've sort of absorbed some of my sins from the night before. And yeah, it was just this really powerful feeling for me of, like I said, just knowing that I was doing it for myself. But yeah, the running helped me to prioritize that. And then as you find something which means so much to you, you're going to just have to naturally cut those other negative things out.
Where does this mindset come from? Because you mentioned you went to therapy a bit. You had the positive, I guess, the stepfather figure as well. Where did the mindset come from? Because as you said at the start, like, running is also part of the mindset. It's not just physical. It's about what's going on in here. Because when I'm on a run, if I'm not focusing. My run's all over the place. It's like an elephant just plodding along in the Sahara Desert. So where does your positive mindset come from? Is this something you've had to learn, or is it something you've always had? Yeah, talk us through that.
Yeah, it's something I had to learn, but I think for me, what's really like springboarded is that I would always listen to music when I was running, and it's really good because you can be in a hurt locker and a certain song can get you through it. But for me, that was just something else to lean on, right? And where I've grown and where I've realized like the warrior that's inside me is not leaning on anything and knowing that I can do everything off my own volition. And it was 2 weeks before my first ever 100K ultra. I read a lot of things about the clarity you can get not listening to music. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll try no headphones, and did a few runs. And then I went 12 and a half hours, no headphones. And just that time spent between your ears and realizing that I can do these things completely solo, completely no distraction. It just completely changed my mindset, and it just galvanized me. And like I said, it just made me realize that I'm a warrior. I don't think I'll ever be an elite runner. I'm not going to run a really fast marathon or a really fast 5K, and that's fine. I've come to terms with it, and it's not why I do it, because I just look at it as a different kind of sport. Like elite runners are amazing athletes, and I really respect that, but I don't think I'm an athlete at all. I think I'm someone that has found something which has made him better, and I'm just never, ever going to quit on it.
Talk us through that drive to do your first ultra marathon, because like even just doing a marathon, that's a big thing, but an ultra marathon, that is just massive. Like what made you go, you know what, I'm going to keep going? It's almost like the Forrest Gump. I'm going to start, I'm thinking about Forrest Gump as I'm talking to you. It just keeps going further and further and further. So yeah, talk us through that first ultra marathon. What prompted that? And then how did it feel? Like, what was this training like? Talk us through all that.
Yeah, like I said, it was just this fascination to go further. So I started running back into 2021. And then middle of 2022, I did my first ever half marathon. I've never running more than 15 kilometers. And then I was like, oh, well, I'll do the full marathon at the end of the year. So I did the Sydney Marathon. And then I went not too bad, considering like I wasn't training. I didn't have a coach, wasn't doing any strength, didn't really know what to do. And then I think 3 weeks later, I was like, I'll just go down to Melbourne, and then did the Melbourne Marathon and run faster than I did the Sydney. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I think that was in November. And then December, I signed up to do a 50-kilometer ultra marathon in the Gold Coast. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I'll just do another one. So then in January 2023, I signed up for the 100K ultra in Western Australia, because like I'm not really sure why, to be honest. Like now I've realized how naive I was, but running just was never that quote unquote hard for me. Like it was strenuous, but my body was holding up really well. And like all I had to do was not quit on it. And I was all right. I could do that. I could hold on and not quit. Now that first 100K ultra was just a real whirlwind, and it's what sort of galvanized me mentally. Like it was just a really, really tough period. Myself and my mum, we found out 2 days before that my grandfather was sadly leaving us. And so they lived up in Taree, so we had to drive up there and say goodbye. And it was just this whirlwind moment. Like when I was a little kid, he would always read me these books called Value Tales, and it was like the value of being a good person or different things. And this really special moment we had together. And when he got dementia in his later years, I actually made up my own version of the Value Tales, like a printed book from Officeworks, and it was called The Value of Being a Grandfather. And it just talked about all the things he did and how he taught me how to ride a bike and catch my first fish. And it was just supposed to be something that my grandma could read to him and that hopefully would jog his memory. And like the last thing we ever did together is I held his hand and read this book back to him. And it was just this like beautiful, like full circle moment. And, it still makes me very emotional just thinking about it. But he was still like alive when I left. And it was a really like tough moment. Like I remember I was sitting in the airport, we were about to fly over to WA, and it just sort of hit me that, oh God, I'm never going to get to talk to this person again. And, I just started like crying a little bit, and Mum was like, oh, what's wrong? I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that guy bawling his eyes out at the airport. Mum's like, who cares? Just feel your pain. And I was sitting there eating a sandwich, just bawling my eyes out in Sydney airport. But yeah, it was just hard for me knowing that I was never going to speak to this guy again, who was such a massive part of my life. Like I said, he taught me how to ride a bike and taught me like a lot of lessons. Like in a lot of ways, he was like a father figure to me as well, like not having my biological dad there for the whole time. But we got over to Western Australia, and he was still there. And so, you're supposed to try and rest and sleep. And then 6 hours before my race, he passed away. And it was a real tough moment for me because I was very emotional, and a lot of me was like, you just don't do it. It's fine. But everything I did my whole life, he was super, super proud of me. And I know that's a way that I could honor him and do that for him. And I know he'd want me to do it as well. And it's just one last way that he could be proud of me. And I took one of his singlets from when he's in the dementia ward, which had his name on it, and I tucked it in my waist, and I was like, I'm going to run with this, and I know he'll always be with me. And, it was we started at midnight, so running in the dark, and I'd never run at night before, never had a headlamp, and I'm just running this 100K ultra. Like looking back, it's just so crazy to think what I was doing. But everything was going super well. That wasn't fine. And then like 30K in, like my knees and my ITB and quad started going. And I was like, oh God, like I've never had to experience this before. I think it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and it starts raining. It's pitch black. I'm on this footpath by myself. And it was like a thing out of a movie. I pulled the singlet, I hold it to the sky and I was like, I need you. And I'm crying. But he helped me get through it. You know, I'm not a very spiritual person, but I truly believe he was there with me. And, you know, we got through it. And even though it was January in Western Australia, and I think it was 37 degrees by the end of it, and we got through it. And it was something like that where I realized, oh, wow, like I can do so much more than I ever thought. And it's not that I have this amazing body for it. Like it's, I have the mind for it. You know, I have this ability to endure, an ability to hold on, an ability not to quit. And that was kind of a whirlwind, but it was a moment where I realized that I can do something great and I can sort of make change. And yeah, it was from there that I then had sort of ideas of doing something, but then I still wasn't sure. And then it wasn't until sort of the first few months of 2023, I was like, oh no, let's go for it. Let's try. And then that's where I got in touch with IMU, which was Ned Brockman's physio, and I also went to them and they sort of started my training plan. And then I got put in touch with Ned's coach, Matty Abel, and we've been together now for about a year. And that's where we've been going through it all. And yeah, that's how the whole idea of sort of the run came from. Yeah, it was just sort of doing that thing. And I said, removing the music and doing it all more like through my own ears, that I've realized how strong I actually am.
It's interesting you say that, because whenever I used to go for a run, and the maximum I was really running is 10K, so it's nothing in comparison to 100Ks or even 1,000Ks. But I thought I needed music, and for a long time I used music to motivate me to run, and you know, I'd put on some heavy metal maybe just to get myself really pumped, or maybe it was like, you know, R&B Fridays or something like that if I was feeling a bit more in the groove, or like a whole mix of diverse songs. But then there was a period there where I took the earphones out. And I felt like I was just a lot more grounded in the run. I felt like I was more present in the run. It actually increased my enjoyment of the run as well by being out there without the headphones. And so it was just interesting that you said that. I wanted to highlight that, is that there is a bit of a bliss moment that we can get when we take the headphones out and we're out enjoying nature for what it's worth, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or, you know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, depending on what you're doing. But I'm interested, like, athletes are superstitious people. Like, has that singlet stayed with you? Do you take it out on all your runs now? Like, what happened to the singlet?
No, I still have it with me, and it's definitely something that I think I'll tuck in for Brisbane to Sydney. I think I'll need every little drop I can get. And I used to be very superstitious, actually. Like when I used to play footy, I would have to put my boots on a certain way, and I'm not superstitious anymore because, I don't know, for me, I think hard work overrides any superstition that I've ever had previously. So yeah, it'll be with me, but I think it's just because I'll need him there with me. But yeah, he'll be there every step of Brisbane to Sydney. And
so how has your running evolved since you've now got a coach and a physio team behind you? Like, because before you were doing that by yourself, were you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's evolved massively. Like literally, sounds crazy after having run 100K ultras and that, but I had to learn how to run. Like my running form was really poor, and I was running for grit and speed and everything I had in me, right? I wasn't really running very efficiently. So I had to sort of, like, it's funny, I got this coach and, you know, we're trying to run 1,000 kilometers, but I actually he pulled back my mileage a lot, and we focused on just doing like incline work, and we focused on getting my cadence, which means it's a higher step ratio, which means that, you know, if you have a lower cadence, you're probably overstriding, which means that the force is going up through your heel and it's going to hit your knees and your hip, and it's just unnecessary force going in your body. So just doing a lot of things just to make me a better balanced and more efficient runner, which end of the day, Brisbane to Sydney, it's not a sprint, right? It's just a battle of efficiency. You've just got to be as efficient as you can each day. So yeah, we had to do a lot of work on that, especially nutrition as well, and injury prevention and sort of warming up and cooling down. Like I used to just sort of, I'd roll the legs out and I'd go run 30K. I'd come home and I'd have a beer. I'm like, oh yeah, go me. So whereas now, and I think I was sort of lucky in that just all these little moments I've had in my journey, like I've always just believed they're supposed to be there. Like I've had these little injuries here and there, and they've just always come at the right time. Like maybe I've been very lax on warming up or injury prevention or cool down and things like that. And they've just sort of been like, hey man, you need to be a little bit better. Whereas now, like for me, I don't go for, like the running is not the run. Like the process is, I have my warm up process, I have my run, I have my cool down and firm down process. And if I don't have the whole time for the run, then I'll shorten the run, because all of those things are a part of it. And I think that's definitely helped. And yeah, just bringing strength in as well. Like I never used to go to the gym. So just to help strengthen your body, like running will obviously build up your endurance, but you need to strengthen your muscles to be able to endure all that load. So that really helped as well. And nutrition was a big one. Like my diet has changed a little bit, but making sure I'm just getting in enough calories, because you're burning so much. And for me with my coach, he said like, a lot of runners just use gels and things like that. But if I try and do gels for 10 days, I'm going to have some pretty hectic tummy issues. So learning how to eat whole foods and stomach that and stop for 5-10 minutes, eat a sandwich, eat some pasta, eat bananas, have like a large Gatorade or some like large volume of liquid, and then just go back running. So now my stomach's pretty in tune with that. And Brisbane to Sydney, if I didn't have a very good tummy, which seems like the last thing you're going to worry about, is probably your legs or your head, but it wouldn't last more than a couple of days. So yeah, there's just, when you first put on your running shoes, you think that's all it's ever going to be, and you think it's the easiest type of activity, but there's so much more that goes into it than you think. But yeah, I'm just grateful for everything that happened. Like I also had a last man standing ultra in South Australia. So you're trying to run 6.7K every hour. And that was supposed to be like, I'd sort of linked up with a charity and everything sort of was started in that for my run, but I hadn't really, I still didn't feel like I'd earned the right to even say what I was trying to do. And I was trying to use that as a springboard to say like, look, this is what I can actually do when I'm put in a situation where it's in terms of me not giving up and not like, there's no deadline. The deadline of that race was me quitting on myself. And so I was really excited for it. And we were doing a lot of training and everything was going really, really well. And then about 5 weeks before it, I got really, really ill. And it wasn't COVID. I did multiple tests, but I just really bad body aches and sick. And I wasn't really able to run more than like 10 kilometers for like 5 weeks. And my last run was, I think, 3K before the race. And my heart rate was through the roof. And I was just body aches. And I was like, oh God. But, we've already bought the ticket and bought a hotel. So I guess we'll go over there. And flying over there, I didn't feel too bad. But then the day of the race, I woke up with body aches and I was sweating and my heart rate was elevated and I was coughing up phlegm. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm doing a race where you keep going to you drop and I'm sick. Like it's probably the worst case scenario. But I was like, well, we're already here, so I'll just try. Also, don't do that is what I should tell people. It's probably not a good idea, but try I did. Yeah, and the first few laps were really bad. Like I looked down my watch and it should be saying 130 heart rate and it's saying like 175. And my resting heart rate was like 120, which is massive for me. So I just had to stop looking at my watch. I'm like, if I look at that, it's going to freak me out. So just sort of battled through that. And the first 2 laps, I was like, well, I'm not going to like make 5 laps. Like I was in so much pain, but I just enjoyed. And I was still really happy. And then I did 15 hours. I run 102 kilometers, which is amazing, but I know it's nowhere near my potential. Like I have so much more in me. But to think about like the amount of times where I've had man flu and I've been in bed for 2 days, no, woes me. And, to know that I can actually go out and run 100 kilometers when I'm deathly ill, like, it's moments like that where I'm like, oh, no, I'm a warrior. Like there's no quit in me. When something really means something to me, I can work so much more than I've ever thought for it.
I was just going to say, man flu is a very debilitating condition.
That is true. We need to shine the spotlight on that.
Yes,
Let's change the podcast and talk about man flu now.
Let's get into the Brisbane to Sydney run, and it's coming up soon. So can you give us the details, like when, where, how is it going to all play out for us so we can cheer you on?
So 8th of May is when we're starting. So we're starting in Eagle Farm, which is a little bit back from Brisbane City. And then, we're tracking down towards Sydney. So the plan is approximately 100 kilometres a day, broken up into about 4 25-kilometre blocks. I might push a block out to maybe 30 if you're feeling good, but I don't think you'd want to push any more than that. I think breaking into those will sort of make it a lot more doable. And I just think it's like body-wise and load management-wise. I'm very lucky that my physio from iMove, she's going to be there. And I think that's sort of invaluable. Having someone not only be a physio, but has worked with me and knows my body is going to be, really massive for me and having that and to be able to lean on that. So, yeah, I think that's going to be really helpful and beneficial. And I've also got a couple of my good mates and my mum and dad are going to be there. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun little sport group. One of my mates said he's going to ride on a tricycle next to me and drink cans the whole time, throw them at me. So that'll be pretty funny. And I might strangle him by the end, but I think he'll be the pest that I need for it. But yeah, so approximately about 100 kilometers a day. And, if we're able to do that, then we'll get back into the Opera House on the 18th and that would give me the record. Like
you're saying 25-kilometre blocks, like what's the pace? Because my pace, I'm going to put myself out there, is around, if I'm amazing, 5.5 minutes for a kilometre, but it's usually around 7, 8. I'm plodding along. Like how fast are you doing per kilometre? It's going to depend on like incline. So for me, anything that starts to feel above more than a 10% gradient, it becomes like a fast walk. So you got to picture 2 nans in a full tracksuit with the visor and the body weights. Like I'm pumping the legs. I'm going for it. Sort of slow walk. Yeah, so it'll depend on how much incline there is per day. But for me, running wise, it'll be about 6 to 6:30 Ks when I'm running, and when you're walking, about 10-minute Ks. So I think it'll probably average out to be about, obviously depending on the incline, I think maybe 13 to 14 hours a day. Like
And I think that'll be the total thing as well in terms of running and stopping and your breaks. I think that's what we want to try and aim for. If we can do the 13 to 14 hours a day of the total run in terms of all your breaks, that gives me enough time to try and get some rest and to get in some physio and some wear and tear maintenance.
So when you hit the Opera House as well, like, is there a big party plan? Like, what are you expecting when you get there?
I'm not too sure. Yeah, like, I went down to Bondi Beach when Ned came in, and it's one of those moments where, in life can be really dull and, it's just day to day, but going like that, you could feel the energy and you could feel the positivity and how everyone just was so up, and it was an amazing moment. And a lot of the times now when I run, I make sure to stop by the Opera House and I just try and think about like how that moment's going to feel. And, for me, like, it's not that I'm already wishing the journey to be over, because for me, the most excited thing I am about this is the journey. And I know how much a battle it's going to be. And I know that I'm going to have to question my resolve, but I know I'm never going to quit on it. And, for me, the journey is the destination. If it's just going from point A to point B, anyone could do it. It's a space between point A and point B that you learn who you are. And especially on something like this, like, there's actually a lot of room between A and B. Yeah, that's what I'm really excited about. But yeah, whenever I sort of get a chance to run past her, I just sort of like stop for maybe 5-10 minutes and just think about the people there and think about, like I said, inspiring people to want to be better, which is what all this comes down to. I'm not saying you have to go out and run 1,000 kilometers or even 100. It's like, couldn't be further from what my message is. And I'm not trying to say, oh, look at me, I'm some hero. Like, again, it couldn't be any further from that. What I'm trying to say is, look what you can do if you decide to make positive change in your life. And it doesn't have to be this massive feat, but I'm saying I have been able to do this by just wanting to be better than myself. And, I think we all are so afraid of the long way. Like, we're so stuck in our ways and we see the long way and we have this fear of change. But it comes down to, like, we look at fear like it's this lake, and this lake's kilometers wide, but I promise you it's only centimeters deep. And we're so worried we're going to drown in it, but you won't. And once you step in it, you realize it's nothing to be afraid of at all, right? And yeah, the long way could be super hard and it's going to be challenging, you know what I mean? But I promise you it's always going to be better than the wrong way. And that's what I did for my whole life. And, living it, knowing that, like, that's just what I want to try and tell people. And then you can make your own path from it. And maybe you want to go run more than 1,000 Ks. Maybe you want to do something else. Like, don't let someone tell you what your limitations are. If you want something bad enough, you can go do it. But, the power and growth you can create just from wanting to be a little bit better from yourself is what I'm trying to spread to everyone.
Now, you are going a long way. Are you going from Brisbane down to the Gold Coast and then along the coast? Like, if people want to come and cheer you on the side of the road, like, where can they find you? What's the rough route?
Yeah, so that pretty much with the rough route. But once we get closer to the day, sort of each day, we'll make sure we have a pretty accurate run map along there. So, because I would love that. I'd love people to come along and for people to tell me about their journey, or if I potentially inspire them, like, that would mean so much to me. So once we get closer to the run, each day we'll be posting sort of run updates and like where our sort of stop points will be, so people that if they do want to join the journey can definitely come aboard.
And where will you post that? Is this a Facebook group? Is it a website? How do people like tune in and follow your journey?
It'll all be like hard on my sleeve. I'd say we'll post updates, but it'll all sort of go through my Instagram, which is LachyCam_runs. And yeah, everything we post up there, and there'll be daily sort of updates, and probably be like throughout the day, there'll be updates of me like this and me like this. And, like I said, the journey that's going to unfold of putting yourself through that fun.
And you're doing this for charity as well. Can you talk us through, like, who the charity is? Like, have you got a target in mind? Talk us through that.
Yeah, so the charity's hard on my sleeve, and like I said, everything. I really believe everything happens for a reason, and every moment sort of happens. And it's funny, like when I used to play rugby, I would always draw a heart on my wrist because I was good, quote unquote, at rugby, but there was no skill involved. I was good because I fucking wanted it more than anyone else. That was it. I wanted that ball like a dog wanted a bone. That's all it came down to. I wasn't the best player on the field, but whenever I was feeling tired, I'd look down on my wrist and say, no, it's heart. It's heart that's going to get me through this. And when I was looking at different charities to do, I was lucky that Mitch Wallace, the founder of Heart on My Sleeve, actually presented to my mum, who works in real estate in like a corporate setting. And she was like, oh, this guy's amazing. You need to see him. And looked into his stuff. And the charity is called Heart on My Sleeve, which is like a funny little tie-in. And yeah, he's a very, very influential person and had a very higher paying job in Microsoft. And he was one of the youngest Australian employees, I think. He lived overseas and lived a high life in everyone's eyes. But he, like me, was masking and had a lot of internal pain that no one knew about. And, he has this video he shared online. And for someone who's masked their whole life, I've watched this video multiple times, and he felt like he took my mask off and was talking to me personally. And it was this really powerful message. And I think that's one thing that I love. And in terms of mental health is people just sharing their raw and honest stories. And Heart on My Sleeve has that. And there's all these people who share their stories. And I think so much growth can be taken from someone going, hey, look at him or her, look at the things they've been through. They're just like me. Like, I'm not crazy at all. Like, they've been through these things, and look where they've become from it. And they also have a lot of free training on their website that people can go and watch. But yeah, I just think the growth that can be taken from that, from just seeing some other person and realizing there's nothing wrong with you. And yeah, and then from getting to meet them, and just, it was all meant to be, right? Like, that's where it was meant to be, and it just felt right. And I want to try and raise $100,000 for them. Like, that's the thing I've set. But also just more awareness for the work they're doing, and to help get them traction. Like, if people can't donate money, can donate time, or if there's something that can help, like anything like that. But also just people being honest, not, like I said, for so long, vulnerability has been disguised as weakness when it's the purest form of strength. And I want to just change, like, if even to this day, if I ask a person what they describe as a strong man or a strong woman, you'd probably point to some big muscly guy, right? And yeah, that's true, quote unquote, but that's not what I want it to be. I want a strong person to be someone who's not afraid to stand on their own 2 feet and to be vulnerable. And because there's nothing to be afraid of about that. You know what I mean? Like, if you're being honest about who you are, and if people don't like that, that's fine, but you can help others by doing that. You can show people who you truly are, and that there's nothing wrong with being yourself and being vulnerable. And I just think that's what a strong person really should be, and that's what I want to try and help people realize.
As you were talking this then, I was reflecting on your journey, and particularly when we talk about construction work and the power of sharing stories. Like, you're very well versed in sharing men's mental health discussions. Like, have some of your mates and maybe even construction colleagues as well open up to you about mental health, or been inspired by the way that you talk about mental health as you do it? Because you're very good at it.
Not so much in construction. I would definitely love for that. But in terms of, I've had a lot of close friends. Like, I was the guy who would always, like, I masked for so long who I was, but when I was on the drink, I was able to be more open, and I would share my story to people. And I feel so fortunate in that, conversation that I've had, just sitting there bailing people up, telling them the same story over and over. But that helped people realize that they were able to be vulnerable. And I've had a couple of my close friends share stories with me and say that I've stopped them from taking their own lives because I was vulnerable, and I've showed them that it's okay to be vulnerable. And it's things like that which just sparked this passion for mental health inside me. And now I'm able to sit here completely sober and talk about it, because I now know, like I said, that the fear is, it's kilometers and kilometers wide, but it's centimeters deep. And I've stepped in. I know there's nothing to be afraid of. That's what I want to try and share to people, that being able to help others. And like I said, now being able to do it completely sober, it's a lot easier to help people when you don't have to be drunk going around to tell your story.
Absolutely. And it is inspiring, and you're actually inspiring me to pick out my shoes again and get back on the track.
Yeah, you got to run 1,000 kilometers with me.
In spirit, maybe. It'll definitely be very slow. You won't hit that record if I'm coming along with you, trust me. But if people want to donate to the charity and to your run, I'm assuming you've got a link that we can put in the show notes.
Yeah, there's a link in my bio on my Instagram under my handle, which I'm sure there'll be a link to that in the bio of the show. And then also there'll be a link on the Heart of My Sleep page too.
All right, awesome. I'll put those links into the show notes for anyone who wants to support you along your journey. Really looking forward to following you on the run, as I said, in spirit, as opposed to on the pavement.
Surely you can give me 5 or 10K somewhere, surely.
Well, we'll see. I won't hold myself to it.
I'm going to pencil you in for 5 or 10K. Pencil you in. It's on the podcast. You can't not do it now.
It's real now. But the last thing, Lachy, first of all, thank you for sharing. It's such an inspiring story, and I think we can gain so much from hearing inspiring stories to prompt us to make positive change in our lives. So thank you for that. But we do talk about some heavy stuff on the show, and I always like to ask my guests one final question to leave us on a lighter note. So if anyone is being triggered by mental health discussions today, to leave them on a lighter note of something that's making you feel good at the moment. And that could be something you're watching or reading or a self-care activity, absolutely anything that's going on in your life that's just lighting you up.
Well, I get a lot through running, but also just walking. But I love just walking alone just through nature, and getting back to nature, especially with no music and no distractions, made me realize just how insignificant all the problems I used to see in my life were, and all the beauty that's actually been hidden in my life for so long. And you get back and you see these amazing wonders of nature, and you just realize, like, wow, like how lucky I am to be in this amazing country, and how lucky I am to be alive, and how lucky I am to have my life. And yeah, just getting back to nature, and sometimes just sitting there and just watching like the leaves blow on a tree and just watching waves crash. It just sounds so simple, but it's such an amazing moment, and it's something that I've taken for granted for so long, and yeah, I'll never take for granted ever again. Yeah,
I get that on the surfboard at the back. When I do eventually get out the back, I'm only learning. So every now and then when it's calmer, I'm able to get the surfboard at the back and just sit there and just appreciate the world for what it is without
Yeah.
any other distractions and just floating on that board. It's really magical. But
Definitely.
again, Lachy, thanks so much for coming on. I really have appreciated it. All the details will be in the show notes for anyone who wants to link in with you, to support you on your run, to follow your run, and also donate to the charity. Again, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, mate. It was a great chat. It's lovely to meet you.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.